Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming this afternoon to our Equity, Justice, and Inclusion Lecture and the Distinguished Alumni Awards. My name is Gautam Yadama. I'm the Dean of the School of Social Work at Boston College, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you and really what promises to be an exciting panel discussion and award ceremony. This is an annual event that is part of a series of events committed to equity, justice, and inclusion. We've gathered a panel of alumni and leaders in social work to examine the challenge and promise of equity, justice, and inclusion, prophetic voices. We also celebrate alumni who represent such prophetic voices in the field, both in the field of practice and in scholarship today. So after the panel, we'll be honoring this year's Distinguished Alumni Award winners. Now, thank you to the members of the Task Force on Equity, Justice, and Inclusion. And these include Patty Birch, Susan Tone, Tiziana Deering, Teresa Shermer, Cindy Snell, Michelle Cheney, and Suzanne Mattis, and our alumni board for organizing this event and taking very good care in how to organize and think about reflecting our themes around equity, justice, and inclusion. Now, tending to equity, justice, and inclusion is an important strategic direction of our school. To achieve equity, justice, and inclusion, we must face inequality, injustice, and marginalization squarely. James Baldwin, who continues to be a prophetic voice for our times today, said it best, and I quote, and I'm going to use two different quotes from him. And I quote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." He also said, "The place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it." We in the school will strive to create such a place that is equitable, just, and inclusive. We will fail in that journey, but we are working hard to succeed over that course of time and whatever time it takes to find that place that is fit for everyone. Thank you and welcome. And Tiziana, over to you.
You know what, I'm going to head right over to my chair. Let's test this out. Is it on? Are you hearing me? No. Mixed answers, so that's confusing. I'm not on, for sure.
Hello.
Yeah, there we go.
I was reflecting as I was sitting listening to the dean that the last time I moderated the discussion at this event, the person I was speaking with was then Boston City Councilwoman Ayanna Pressley. And she is now off being a prophetic voice for the nation. And it's really exciting to kind of be sitting here and helping create a conversation that I hope to participate in as little as is humanly possible. Knowing such a wonderful legacy of speaking truth to power and being prophetic has been part of this event in the past. So it was just a kind of an exciting thing to remember. I'm going to very quickly introduce our panelists, and by doing that, I'm going to give 2 sentences on each of them that you are welcome to read along with from the booklet here. And then I'm going to invite them to say a little bit more about themselves as we go into the panel. So we'll do when I call your name, if you would come up, please. So Michael Grinnell is our first panelist, and Michael will sit right along the line here. He is a licensed certified social worker and postgraduate fellow at Williams College in their Integrative Wellbeing services. He's got extensive experience providing clinical services to children, youth, and families, and his background spans several therapeutic settings. Let's bring up next Josh McNeil. Josh is a behavioral health clinician at Brigham and Women's Hospital, which I can never say right the first time. He holds an LCSW in Massachusetts and is working towards his LIC. And prior to the Brigham, he was a clinician at the Center for Alternative Sentencing and Employment Services in New York City. Third, let's bring up Dr. Desmond Upton Patton. Dr. Patton is a public interest technologist who uses qualitative and computational data collection methods to examine the relationship between youth and gang violence and social media, how and why violence, grief, and identity are expressed on social media, and the real-world impact these these expressions have on well-being for low-income youth of color. And then last, and after I introduce you, fancy if I can call you Greg again after that, Greg. All right, so Reverend Dr. Gregory G. Groover Sr. And Greg was appointed pastor of the historic Charles Street African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1994. He comes out of Freeport, Long Island, and graduated from Morehouse in Atlanta, and then got his master's, actually, of divinity and social work from Union Theological Seminary in Columbia, which is where Desmond is now, so I thought that was a neat small world. I invite you to read more about them, but right now, before we start the panel, what we'd like to do, we've got a couple of people with microphones, we'd like to take just a minute to ask you what you came to hear, so that we can be responsive to that in the discussion that we're about to have. So, what'd you come to learn? What are you hoping to hear? What are you hoping are things that our panelists will discuss? And we'll give you a minute to take the mic and let us know so that we can be responsive.
I made it.
You did. Welcome.
Big campus. I'm interested in learning ways in which Black women social workers can aid and support Black men.
Thank you. Who else? What's up, y'all?
We've talked about this before as melanated social work, but recently, just a couple months ago, there was a hate crime that occurred here on campus. And I'm curious, what is your perspective on, is this indicative of a larger sentiment of white supremacy? And then as social workers or as healers, what should we be doing in response to that?
Thank you. Who else? Anybody else have something they really came to hear?
When you all are in your offices meeting with clients, how do you avoid not being triggered from them reminding you of some of the same experience that you've been through?
Thank you. We have a couple more.
Yeah, just for since you guys are already out in the field and I'm a new student, I'd like to have an idea of how it looks in practice to be a melanated social worker, and what types of things to keep in mind while I'm in school, and I guess focusing on what kind of skills possibly I should be trying to pick up on and pay some special attention to while I'm at DC.
Great, thank you. And I think one more back over here in the corner. Margaret?
I came to hear grace.
You came to hear grace? Me too. Thank you for that. And thank you for letting us know kind of what's on your minds, so that we can be responsive to that as we have our conversation. So I have, my first fancy question. And I'm going to ask it of each panelist, and if you don't mind, we'll go straight down the line for answers, 3 or 4 minutes per panelist. And then we're just going to see where it goes from there. We'll do probably about 25 minutes of intra-panel discussion, panel discussion once that part is done, and then we're anxious to also turn it over to you for more back and forth with our panelists and more questions that you might like to have answered. So let me start from there. As we go, Michael, I'll start with you. It'll be the same question for each person. I'd love to both ask you to share with the group maybe one thing that's most important to you about who you are that might not have been on the bio page that you think enhances kind of your participation in this conversation. And then my go-to definition of prophetic voice, and that's how we chose to frame this conversation. Intergenerational discussion of men of color and social work around prophetic voice. My go-to definition is that it's speaking truth to power. And that usually contains also both a healthy dose of being ahead of your time and a little bit out of the wilderness. What is your definition of being prophetic, and how are you thinking about it in your work?
Can you all hear me okay? My name is Michael. I'm currently working at Williams College, providing therapeutic services to the college population out there. I think with regards to being prophetic, the first thing that comes to mind are people who I would identify as being prophets. Jesus, Moses, Elijah Muhammad, and thinking about the work that they did in their communities are very closely related to the principles related in social work, like social justice principles. And I try to carry those principles to help guide the work that I do with clients. I think that it's really important to be aware of transference and countertransference and bias and stereotypes that I hold, but helping sort of like filter and guide the work that I do with clients. But also, when I think of also being prophetic, like being ahead of one's time, thinking about what's outside of the realm of where we are right now in the current state. I think that with regards to mental health, we operate under capitalism. I think insurance companies get in the way of accessibility. And what would it mean for mental health services to be universal, to be free, to have evidence-based practice that's not Eurocentric, but like supportive of Black and Brown communities. And even say that, it's like, well, that could never be. But why is that? I think, with regards to being prophetic, like it's okay to imagine liberating mental health and transformative services and radical ideas about how we can better support different types of communities.
How can I go after that? So I think prophetic, my definition more so is that of seeing the unseen, being able to see what others don't see. And I see the field of social work being very non-white. I see more Black social workers, brown social workers. I see getting paid a decent and better wage for what we do. If I say that again, I see us getting a better wage for our time and what we bring to the table. Can I get a hand clap for that? And I also see, prophetically speaking, this is the 400th year of African Americans being in this country, right? Does anybody know who Joy DeGruy is?
Yes.
Right. So I think prophetically, I feel that maybe there are some reparations that could be given to Black people for mental health services, and not it being some type of grant-based thing, but maybe that of policy, right? And I also see now Black men kind of being, in some senses, speaking out more about mental health for themselves. We see that in the NBA. The National Basketball Players Association, they have a new mental health or mental wellness division, and you see people like DeMar DeRozan or Marquise Morris from the Celtics. They're speaking more about mental health, and that's opening up, that's stopping the stigma, opening up and letting there be more vulnerability. And you can even see prophetically, you see in hip hop, from Big Sean speaking about hip hop. You may see maybe Jordan Lucas, Cousin Stiz. You may see Kid Cudi. You're seeing these things, and I think those things are really important down the line. And I think prophetically, I think Black women are the future of social work, because if you look at therapy for Black girls, if you look at Dr. Joy Bradford at Clark Atlanta University, you see the podcasts. A lot of podcasts are done by Black women who are mental health professionals. They're changing the game, and they definitely need to get their just due, their credit, and the pay more than I do. And that's where I see social work prophetically.
So these brothers are making it really hard to follow up. Hey everyone, I'm Desmond Patton. I'm a professor at Columbia University School of Social Work and director of the SAFE Lab. I'm going to tell you a story that's been really transformative in my research. For the past 6 years, I've been studying one young Black woman. I'm a violence researcher, a qualitative violence researcher, and I have been interested in how young Black kids navigate violence. And as a young researcher, I was really hyper interested in conducting this compelling research that was going to get me tenure and get me fame and all these things. And the reality is I had bought into narratives, pathologizing narratives about young Black kids, and the research questions that I was asking of the data were just wrong. So instead of seeing young Black kids and this young woman that I've been studying for the past 6 years as a whole person, I, in my initial research questions, was demonizing her. I had bought into the stereotypes and narratives that other people tell about my community. However, social media allowed me to see her differently. Her narrative on social media told a completely different story. So I was smacked in the face with reality about what it means to be a young Black woman in America, to navigate violence, and what grief and trauma and aggression and threats and all those things look like in reality through social media. And so for me, when we talk about being prophetic, I think a core component for myself is to be vulnerable enough to allow myself to receive narratives and stories and to hear them fully and truly, and to leverage those stories to communicate truths and understanding, and to butt up against pathologizing narratives about my community. And so I feel like I am constantly learning what it means to be prophetic from young people. What does it mean to center and privilege the experiences of young Black and brown children, and to allow that to be the window with which we see the world? And so I still feel like I'm in a growth space. I have growing edges with being prophetic, but I think that the young children of our communities is where it's at.
Listening to these three young brothers, I can tell you I have now changed my entire understanding of the prophetic. And I say that with admiration. First, I don't know what Tiziana said, that she wanted us to talk briefly about who we are outside of the booklet. I didn't get a chance to see the booklet, but I will say that this is probably my first time. I just never imagined it would happen, but it shall happen to all of us. But this is my first time that I am sitting on a stage, and I'm the elder or the senior person. I'm not used to that, but it's an honor to be here with my brothers, and Tiziana and DMin, and thank you for inviting me. When I think of the prophetic, and to me, that definition is a continual, it's a work in progress as a pastor, as a social worker, and as someone who tries to work as an educational activist or public education activist for our children. I think, particularly with the profession of social work, and that is, social work profession is the arena and is the work that defines and demonstrates better than any other profession what it means to be prophetic. Because the social workers are the ones who are called and who are needed to always be on the edge, to always call and speak to those in power who don't want to hear the truth, and to also speak life and hope to those who have been oppressed and those who have been downtrodden for so long. The church has lost that edge. Politicians have left that edge, if ever they were on that edge. And so it is the social worker It is the individual who has been called and prepared to not only on an individual level assist those through this crazy, broken world and society, but to also, from a macro and a larger perspective, talk about the injustice, talk about what's not right, and speak truth to power that I believe is ultimately still the inherent call and the purpose of social work.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but before I do that, I wonder if any of you have questions of each other or things that you'd like to build on the things that you just heard. I don't want to miss that opportunity. So let me turn it over to the four of you to each other first.
I'd love to hear, Michael, what are you doing at Williams College?
A few things. Because I just got planted myself in that community. I'm doing a 2-year fellowship there, and I live in the community. There's not a whole lot going on. It's really, it's out there. But I believe that when we're doing social work, it's important to be an active stakeholder within the community that we serve. And I have an interest in supporting young men of color, so I was able to partner with one of the deans and create a Men of Color collective. They have their Black Student Alliance groups, they have their other affinity groups. The participation and sort of engagement seems to be lacking. So this is a new initiative that we were able to just start. So that's one thing. I just finished teaching a class for winter study about self-compassion. And then I'm providing individual therapy as well as group therapy for the graduate and undergraduate students out there. Like I said, I just believe in being an active stakeholder in the community, and I'm still kind of getting my feet wet. I've only been out there for about 5 months now. I wanted to build upon something that you were saying with regards, or Desmond, about understanding and prioritizing the narrative of young children. And I think that when we're serving marginalized and oppressed communities, the communities that are under siege and have the open wounds from policy, that's where the expertise lies. It's so, and when you're doing research, I just want to reiterate how valuable it is to just put their voices to the forefront, and as opposed to coming in with a sort of specific plan of I want to do research and I'm gonna come in and come out. But I just wanted to sort of reiterate how important it is put their voices, and they're just to respect their voices.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we realized in our research is the importance of naming and claiming the lived experience of young people as expertise. In the computer science, the other field that I work in, is domain expertise. That your lived experience is something that oftentimes people capitalize on and monetize for the creation of technologies and other systems, and yet we are rapidly depleting that resource from our communities. And so how do we understand and recognize that as being something that we can leverage for good and to help young people understand that we have a pathway towards a career, entrepreneurship, so forth and so on. So we were really trying to focus on that and privileging the voices of those young people as we do the work is really important. Yeah, I have a question for the clinical folks to my right. How do you reconcile clinical practice, which at times upholds pathologizing lenses for Black and brown communities with your own value sets? At what points do you make decisions around, do I follow this thing I learned at DC, or do I tap into my values and make a different decision? How do you do that?
I think it's a case-by-case basis. I try to understand the context of where the participant, client, whatever you want to call it, is coming from, and then I make a decision from there. I try to get a knowledge of maybe their culture, where they're from, their age. I try to just learn from them and listen to them, and then make, because no person is the same. So I try to tailor-make my services to them, person by person, case by case.
Yeah, I'll just add on a little bit here. I do think it is on an individual level, but I also think, and I also want to speak to the gentleman's question about like what happens in that therapeutic relationship. As I said earlier, like I'm aware of the transference and counter-transference that's constantly happening in communication. And I think it, filtering out through the background that I have by attending Boston College, in addition to like other readings to like try to decolonize what I've learned and been indoctrinated to know, helps guide the work. And I'll give a brief example. I had a young college student come in experiencing a lot of guilt and shame about his white identity. I really struggled to hold him in that space and to listen to, because now he's in a class where he's having conversations that are, he's being challenged on everything he's ever known, and he's sharing it with me, and I'm trying to, and I got this like, what you're hearing is right, man. Like, people are dying, and white supremacy is omnipresent, and it impacts us. I think just being aware of what I'm feeling in that moment and the counter-transference that's happening is so important. And I think that there's just there's a strength in just like being aware of what you're feeling in the moment, what's happening in your body, what's happening in your minds, and then also like the evidence-based practice that we learn here and how to utilize it. So, yeah.
Greg, I'd actually love to hear you answer that same question from a pastoral dimension or a social work dimension, or the intersection of the two.
I think your values are, you just can't tuck them in the closet. When, even as you are engaging in the work of helping, assisting, and helping people in their own self-empowerment, you have to, your own paradigm and your construct of justice and compassion needs to play out. But even beyond that, you've got to have passion. You've got to be unapologetic about your passion for the work that you're doing. And not being afraid to appropriately show your, not only passions, but your feelings, your emotions, your perspective, and where you are. Never to superimpose on those who you're working with and working around, but at the same time, the space that you're in, knowing who you are, knowing who you represent and what you represent, and bringing that into that space in a way where it's not suffocating or stifling anyone else, but at the same time it affirms what your passion holds.
So to Reverend Gruber, Greg, where do you see the alignment of both being a social worker and a pastor? What are those alignments like, and where do they not align?
That's a question that I'm still struggling with. I always wanted to be a social worker. I did not want to go into ministry. I ran from ministry, and I ran to social. I now realize, and it took me years to understand that I did not go into, as a minister, I did not go into social work to make the social work profession better. I went into social work to help make the church become better. The church is in need of the same constructs and paradigms that social work produces, espouses, and stands on. The church as I said earlier, because we've lost our edge on being prophetic in a 21st century relevant way, I believe that it's going to impart the work of the social work profession to help save the church. I believe that the church is no longer, and this is how social work means, informs my work as a ministry, learning when I was at Columbia University School of Social Work. And that is that the church is no longer standing against the oppressive regimes on all levels of our society. We're not speaking out against it. And we're not calling to the unjust practices. We're not calling them out on how we need to even tear down the structural patterns of injustice, of oppression, of racism. We're not doing that anymore. And that's across the board. Anytime when, well, I won't get into the political dynamics of what's going on now. I'll stop.
Let's get into it.
I can't understand how a major sector of the church, namely the evangelical community, will still try to do any and everything to justify probably the most racist hatred presidential administration that we have ever seen. And how even yesterday I was listening to a conversation, Craig, I forgot the brother's name, who on MSNBC. He was interviewing Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham, and how he could not bring himself to acknowledge that our current president has a pathology of telling lies. He would not say, yes, our president has been misleading, has lied. He could not say it at all. And that says something about where the church is, the American church is. I don't want to paint a brush over the entire institution of the church in our country, but a large part of our church has lost its prophetic call and has abandoned it.
Amen.
Encourage you to keep talking to each other as long as you want, and then if there's time for my questions, I'll ask them. But this is great, so please.
I just have 2 points. One, I mean, I think you really underscore the reason why so many folks have been leaving the church in the last 10, 15 years, and why I left the church. I mean, as Black folk, church oftentimes is a large part of your life. Wake up, going to church, go to bed, everything is church, especially coming from the South. And it is probably one of the most heartbreaking moments as I became a social worker was having to decide which identities do I want to represent in this space. I'm Black, I'm gay, I'm male, and I'm Christian. And how do I make sense of that in that context? And I had to make a decision, a choice, around how I wanted to show up. And I had to let church go because my identities were not, I could not fully represent my identities within the church context. So that is, I just wanted to understand that point. You said something about passion that really struck a chord with me that I wanted to just engage the panel on, is how do you maintain and sustain passion within systems and institutions where white supremacist practices are the norm, right? So a lot of us hold true, like have passion. We don't need someone to give us passion. We have it. It's in us. And then you are identified as being a smart Black man, a smart Black person who can make things happen. And then the systems rear their ugly head. And then you're faced with trying to move a ball in a space where the ball doesn't go anywhere. So how do we maintain passion within this context?
I think, I speak for myself, what keeps me passionate would be my melanated social work brothers, Marvin, Jesse, and Mike. I mean, we do a peer supervision on Skype. Like, at least we do it like once a week, but we do it probably like once a month now. And we talk to each other about how to navigate these systems. And we've always had this level of support. I mean, I've been out to Oakland to meet Jesse, and we text each other. But I think just starting from BC as social work students, we shared that level of brotherhood, right? And I feel as though working within the systems, you kind of get tired of it. And I think what we want to do with melanated social work is work on what we can. There's a lot of stuff we can do, but we can try to focus on what we can. One of my identities is Christian as well, so keeping that identity of faith within what I do, and then just having a really good supportive partner. She's in the crowd. Having a really good supportive family, and personally for me, my grandmother was a very she spoke truth to power, right? She was actually a prophetess in the church. She's a little woman from South Carolina, and she spoke truth to power all the time. She's no longer here, but just having her mold me and speak to me and let me know, she was prophetic to me, right? Speaking prophetically. So she was the one that would be like, you have a passion, you have this, these are your skills, don't let that go to waste. So I think it's my passion is restored through my environment and my support system.
I just want to reiterate that the melanated social work group that we formed has really been excellent for my own mental, emotional well-being. The fact that we can Skype once a month and talk about what's going on in the workplace and our individual lives has been really, really impactful. I would just encourage people to find a community that you can lean into. As Josh said, having a supportive partner, family, that you can lean into and share what you're holding, it makes all the difference in the world. When I think about the identities of religion and seeking therapy and how they can coexist, I think oftentimes there is such a clear divide. You can pray away what you're going through, and that doesn't work all the time. Not to say that it's not important, but it's really, I think there's a lot of value in understanding how the two can coexist. And when we were talking about identities, I was thinking about I'm a heterosexual, cisgender black man, and I've worked in foster care and adoption. That meant spending a lot of time in courthouses. And when I was first getting going for the first few months, my badge wouldn't work. And so I'd be in a courthouse, and I'd be mistaken for, where's the officer that's supposed to be supporting you? Or are you a client's family member? Who are you? And I'm a social worker, and it's like, you're with the government? Oh, okay. That didn't even cross their mind. And I think about how the identity that I hold, it's just treated differently depending on the space that I'm in and who's aware of what I'm there to do. Yeah.
If I could say one more thing, I think that as clinicians, and I think it's what we're taught to, if you're in the field to give services, it's also important to receive services. I actually have a black male therapist that I go to once a week, and I think it's good for him to call me and help on some of my toxic qualities, and to also process with him, what is going on in my head and what I'm experiencing, is that me? What's going on? And then just to get some gems and some way to maneuver life, and he definitely is culturally competent. He actually went to Morehouse as well, and he's there for me, and I just need that supportive part to maintain my passion.
I just want to add, and that's the question about how do you sustain your passion, and I agree with what our brothers have said, that the most critical way, one way of actually keeping your passion and keeping kindle is that you gotta find your community, your comrades that share that same passion and share the direction that you're going in. I mean, when you think of the prophetic word, the John the Baptist paradigm of one standing out by himself, calling out to a new world of justice. The Martin Luther King being the leader and everyone always looking to the one voice, the leader. And by the way, although I do critique the church, I also see a lot of hope in the church. That one day our church, black church, white church, all churches will be inclusive, will be prophetic, will be true. But I do think that there's a need. One of the things that happens particularly with black pastors and all pastors, that we often think that if we're on to something, if we're leading an issue, that we must be the one that stands out, as opposed to a community of us, brothers and sisters, our comrades in the struggle. So you keep your passions like a bundle of logs that are on fire. As long as the bundle is together, that fire will continue to grow. And when you begin to separate them one by one, the fire goes out. And so I think it's important that you always find your community. And that helps you keep your passion.
Seems like my turn. Several of you spoke in your opening comments or in responses to each other about kind of the intersection of telling people's stories and doing so to make sure that the reality of people's truths come front and center, not only in the day-to-day work, but also in the constant struggle to break current systems and institutions of oppression and remake them towards a place of justice. So one of the questions that I'd like to invite you to answer in whatever way you want to is, if we did that, what are the truths that would get told?
I think it would be the voices that are often left out of conversations or having other people's will imposed upon them. I think everything that we do is very reactionary right now. And I'm speaking from a lens of supporting young people of color who come in and, when I was in the school district, would be overprescribed medication for being having ADHD and ADD, presenting with symptoms of like hypervigilance, maybe easily irritable. But this is a survival skill in their community, of being hyper aware of what's going on around you. They don't necessarily need medication, so they can sit in a chair for however many hours and look at the whiteboard and look at what's being presented to them. Being attuned to different learning styles. That's just a small example of how we are reactionary instead of being preemptive. And I'm going to speak on Jesse's point about the hate crime that happened here at Boston College. Now, Boston College isn't the only institution where hate crimes happen, but hate crimes have happened here. And my understanding is there was sort of a visual held, and you're going to see the same people that go to those visuals of coming together to heal, right? It's going to be the same black and brown people of color coming together to try to heal in that space. But something that needs to be thought about is, how can we be preemptive? And why do we continue to sort of offer a culture of violence? And why do people feel emboldened enough to write the N-word all over a building? It's not the first time it's happened. It may not be the last time it's happened. And I just think about how we are so reactionary in our measure as opposed to being preemptive with trying to instill different practices. And I'm speaking for, like, I'm at Williams College and I see signs of all types of people that belong to different affinity groups saying, like, you belong here. And I saw that message and I was like, I know I belong here. Like, I know I'm capable. But, like, is that message for me, or is it more for, like, the white counterpart to say, like, okay, yeah, black and brown people can come have this education as well. Yeah.
I think as far as a truth that I've maybe witnessed in the field, and I think it was basically similar to what Mike was saying, that there's a lot of reactive things, there's not a lot of policies, there's not a lot of preventative things. A lot of times, there are maybe not certain services available, and I think if, in a preventative sense, if we were able to offer more certain services to, black and brown men, like what would DV look like? Maybe some DV numbers could go down, right? What would certain things because truthfully, I feel like there's a lot of Band-Aid solutions that go on, right? It's just people making a profit off the suffering of other people. What would it look like if there were preventative things in place so that, maybe I might not have a job and I'm cool with that, right? But I think that definitely, we definitely need to address those truths, and I think that, again, there just need to be some more spaces for those people in those places. I mean, Jesse's from the Bay Area, so he's talked to us about gentrification, like how does that displace a community, right? There's just a lot of reactionary things, and I just think, to Mike's point, it's a lot of reactionary things that are going on.
In terms of truths, I would say that I think we will begin to realize that we don't have all the answers, and that sometimes we need to sit down and shut up, and we need to listen, and we need to be reflexive, and we need to think critically about why we became social workers in the first place. And oftentimes, the positionality of the position of being a social worker, your elite education, your identities in the space take over, and we can forget to listen, to be in the moment, to meet people where they are. What does that really mean? And I think what I've learned from my research is that oftentimes these labels that I've either internalized or been assigned can block my ability to actually work with communities and allow their brilliance to be generated and to figure out ways to support them. That I don't have to come in with this PhD and these research chops and do everything. That actually I can sit and listen and help facilitate conversations and help to use the positionality that I have for a variety of outreach efforts and mobilizing languages and things like that. And so, I've been hit in the face with this idea that we don't know everything, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree, and I just want to add on, just push a little further. I think when we talk about, for me, the ministry and social work really become inextricably bound and inseparable is when I agree that we need to realize at times that we just need to sit down and be quiet and listen. But when we really engage in the work of self-empowerment of others, that when we actually believe that despite how a person is labeled and what clinical label that person has, that a person and or people or a community pretty much fairly know what they need, and if you give them an opportunity, they can chart their course to where they need to go without us as pastors, clergy, licensed social workers telling them, but just whatever role we can do to assist them, and them telling us what they need to help them get to where they want to go to. And I think that's what we all need to be doing more of. I totally agree about being proactive, but I also believe that we should be about self-empowerment. And not empowering people empowering themselves. And our role is to assist as they see as appropriately needed.
So what do you all think social work education in respect to that should look like if we are truly about self-empowerment? So I'm the chair of the curriculum committee at Columbia School of Social Work. We ain't doing that. Our curriculum is not even close to that. And I'm not even sure if we brought it up that we would even be able to have a productive conversation on what that looks like, particularly within the context of communities of color. So I guess maybe kind of an aspirational question is, what should social work education look like in the 21st century, and particularly for folks who will be working with or in communities of color?
And far be it for me to be the one, because I'm not really in the everyday professional social work, and certainly, and even more teaching. But I think if social work, if it starts fundamentally, intrinsically at the level that it's about people, right? And it's how we see the people. We half glass, half empty, half full. Do you see the person or the community only through the lenses of what society has labeled as what's wrong with them? What are the ills? Or do we see their promises and their hopes even in light of their challenges and struggles? And how do we work on helping them to build their capacity in growing their strengths? And I think if we start with that, and if our curriculum begins to form and shape that perspective, I think it's a start.
I'm also going to just add on to that. I think with the glass half full or half empty, being in social work, oftentimes we come at it like, the glass is refillable. And I think that, yes, it is individual. With our focusing on empowering focusing on empowering people to do the work. I'm losing my train of thought right now. Hang on, give me a second. You want to jump in?
I mean, I think what you were saying is basically a strengths-based perspectives is where it starts at. So I think it definitely should be a strengths-based perspective. Strengths-based perspective from the community, from the individuals, and leading it from there. And I think also it takes more people of color to maybe coin some different types of therapeutic modalities. My brother Jesse has talked about liberation counseling. We can look into Joy DeGruy. We can look into John Henrik Clark, who is a psychologist or what have you. There's a lot of those people that, sometimes we forget how great we are. And I think our communities sometimes forget that. And I think that the more we just breathe into them, what their strengths are, and also giving more people of color, especially Black women, a chance to shed light into certain modalities, whether it be Black women, Latinx women, Asian women, people of color in general, giving them those platforms to say, that evidence-based stuff over there is okay, but this over here is kind of cool. And I think that's where we have to toe that line, because part of me, I love evidence-based things, but sometimes the evidence-based stuff can go to the side and be able to be innovative to say, oh, let's give this idea a chance. Let's give this idea a chance. It's all about a game of chance and just being innovative to see what maybe in a macro sense this community needs, but in a clinical sense, in individual counseling, or maybe in maybe mezzo sense in group counseling, what does that look like? And I think it's just all about being innovative and, towing that line between that works for this community, but I don't know about that stuff over there works for this community. And I think it's just about taking it again, little by little, and just trying to be innovative and creative.
So I'm going to give you last word on this. Heads up, that then I'm coming to you for questions. So if my microphone people both could be ready, and if you can start thinking about where you want to go next, we'll have 10, 15 minutes for questions, so please.
I just wanted to add on, Reverend, you made a comment earlier about speaking life into people, and that resonates, because that's the role that we have. And I wanted to say that my experience in the field, I've had colleagues not come from the stance of we're operating within systems of inequity, and they've really been emboldened in trying to just tell clients to work harder with the work and work harder to get resources, and just really trying to, or looking at them as if they're very expendable. And I think about with the curriculum, like we need to teach that we are trying to survive in systems of inequity. Like that's the baseline with regards to education, healthcare, and a number of other things, right? But that's, for whatever reason, it doesn't always ring or hit home with some people. So I think that's just like how that's the foundation right there.
I'd like to turn it to you now for questions. And you are welcome to ask one of a specific panelist or of the panel as a whole, and I can help. But please, let's hear from you and what you'd like to hear them talk more about. How many mics do we have going, by the way? Okay. Can we take mine and put it into action too, so we can queue up the second person? Please, we have a gentleman here.
Thank you. This has been so thought-provoking at the end of a long work week. Really appreciate what you're sharing. And my question is, white ally, how can I be a white ally in a very productive way?
I mean, I'm gonna say maybe an accomplice. I'm learning some of this stuff too, so maybe being an accomplice, an ally, and I learned this more so this morning, again, from a melanated social work brother. I think they should be some professors. They're very, efficient dudes. But I think that there's a sense of, there's an ally who's kind of like on maybe the sidelines cheerleading, but then maybe there's an accomplice that's with you. But I think also taking that into account, like, let's be real. Who voted for the most for Donald Trump?
White women.
Right? So I think that as what can be done is, there's a sense of, how can I say this? There's a sense of like, in a perceptive way, like looking the part, but actually are you doing the work? But also being able to listen to Black people, listen to their experiences, or people of color, not invalidating what is going on, and just, I think Desmond was saying like, maybe we don't know it all. We don't know it all, but also if you are a white person, it's one thing to say you don't know it, and I understand that, but also in a sense, letting somebody take that power and divesting from your privilege and putting somebody else in power. I think that's one way you can be an accomplice, and sometimes maybe not taking up space, right? I think that, when there's cultural things, maybe social workers of color, sometimes it's really full and packed with white people, and I know and I understand, you want to learn, but sometimes, like, maybe not going there, maybe going on a webinar, maybe going online to take that digital space, but the physical space should be Black and brown. So just taking a step back. Thank you.
Anything else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that and this is not, I didn't get your name.
Me?
No.
Gail.
Yeah, not that I'm referring to you because I'm not, but often when white persons come to me or to the church or to us, and they say we want to be allies, it's coming from guilt. And we understand the guilt, but we can't deal with your guilt. We can't. That's not what the struggle is about. It's not what it's about. It is about, and if we deal with your guilt, then it takes away, first of all, and then the onus is on us, and the burden's on us to try to address your guilt when that's not, it doesn't, that guilt doesn't belong to us. I would prefer that when a person comes to me, a white, privileged person from that background, that, first of all, if they want to be a part of what our struggle is, don't come for the moment, see it as a movement. Second, see where there is the commonality, and that is that if you feel equally, as I do, that you have been called to a work of eradicating injustice, period, that's what's needed. And keep that front and center. And I agree with you that sometimes you need to take a step back to hear, to learn, to process. But again, I just think that it's important that the guilt is there. Don't let the guilt drive you, because then it's all about your guilt, and it's not about addressing the issue.
So I've been sitting here since you've asked that question and wondering why I'm triggered by it, and wondering why I'm always triggered by the question. And I think that, in part, I don't believe the question. It has nothing to do with you personally. It's that I think that there is a reality of needing to give up a part of who you are, to give up privilege in order to actually be an accomplice, to be an ally. And are you ready and willing to do that? And so until that feels real, it just feels like a question that's centered in liberal privilege. Yeah.
Yeah. All that great I'm gonna stand up so everybody can see my shirt go. One for the Melanated Social Work. You're on Instagram. So I'm also a social worker, obviously, and I know a lot of us have a lot of white female supervisors. And so something that often happens in people that I work with, and I've even experienced this myself, is that I try to, how do I say this? Try to find the right words so that no one is offended or I'll come off as the angry black man or some of my colleagues come off as the angry black woman. And my question to you all is how do you experience that, one, and how do you deal with that?
I'll say yes, absolutely. I mean, it's such a fine line and a balance of being assertive and being passive, to not ruffle too many feathers within the workplace, right? I like my job, I want to keep my job. And it's also very interesting about who I'm doing the groundwork with. Sometimes people of color, but the higher up I go in an organization, the more white faces I see. And so if something does come up, who's going to have my back when it goes to the higher ups? Something I want to bring up too is when I think about like white women in positions of power. If it comes, I know there's a significant movement right now with the Me Too movement. But when we come to like voting politically, like white women will choose race over gender. Where am I going with this, right? If I could bring it back to just walking that fine line, how do I deal with it? I find solidarity in the melanated social work. I find solidarity in my people of color who are colleagues of mine, and communicating with them when I do have an issue. If it is something I'm contemplating, is this something that might get, we'll have to bring attention to later on? I want to check in and make sure that I'll have support, and to make people well aware, whatever the situation is, my perspective on it, because I don't want to go into it alone. And I'll end with that.
For me, it definitely, to be honest, it impacts my mental health. You always have to be self-aware. I don't know if anybody is aware of, there's a kind of a complex or unique history between men of color, black men, and white women in this country. If you look at Rosewood, if you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, if you look at The Birth of a Nation, the woman, she jumps off the cliff from this quote-unquote black male aggressive person who is some sexual deviant or something like that. There's a little bit of that in there, in this field, and it does not get talked about. So you basically have to carry yourself a certain way, not to be a threat. You have to be able to, like, your intonation and voice has to be a certain type of way. You have to be able to watch your facial expressions. I'm a bigger guy, you know, I work out and I eat. So I'm a bigger guy, and I have to watch how my frame can be mistaken. It's a lot of stuff that goes through my mind, and sometimes it can be crippling for me because I just don't want to be seen as this, that, and the third. There's even a guy in Miami, he was a therapist, and I think he got shot or something for being with his client at the time. So just like Mike was saying, like I've been in situations where people, this is in New York, this is in Boston, are you such and such as brother, nephew, this, that? Even if you come in with a lanyard on, they're still gonna give you the 3rd degree. And you have to go through all these levels in your head about how to present yourself, how to be assertive, how to walk a fine line, how not to lose your job, and how to project yourself and still be who you are. It's a lot that goes on, and it's something that I struggle with all the time.
So we were having this conversation at the Society for Social Work Research conference that happened in San Francisco just a few weeks ago. And I was in a small group, and I remember telling essentially an all-white group of women that for all of my life, I think I've been afraid of white women. It was the first time that I'd ever said that I ever articulated that. In the moment, what kind of came to me was that there's a lot of power in being vulnerable, and there's a lot of risk in being vulnerable, and that your positionality will dictate whether or not vulnerability is going to work in this particular context or not. And so I think that you have to negotiate that with yourself around the extent to which it's okay and brave for you to be vulnerable, and if you are willing to take those risks, and if that matters to you. I just got tenure in October, so my care is a lot different now. I hope to be more vulnerable in these particular spaces and be very true to myself because the risk has diminished.
My experience has been, because this is an issue that I dealt with I'm still dealing with. From pre-K to 12th grade, 95 to probably 99% of my school teachers were white women. Until I went to Morehouse College. Just so my paradigm, my understanding of who facilitates instruction, who teaches, who has the information, the knowledge, is white women. And I didn't realize how much it played out, even when I was chair of the Boston School Committee several years ago. And there were 2 white women on the school committee who were quite aggressive at times, and inappropriately aggressive at times, all in my face, even in the public meetings. And what I grew up and how I often dealt with white women particularly was being very gentle, know who I am, but still, not wanting to characterize and show the angry black man, the beast, that the image that we sometimes get. And it was not until, I think, my second year as chair when I just could not take it anymore. And I just went off, that I felt liberated. And when I say liberated, I felt like I was also being true to myself. That sometimes, even despite the negative images that African American men or men of color get as angry persons, sometimes you just have to be angry and show your anger. And if you know who you are, things will handle.
So first I'd like to name the irony of the white woman then taking the microphone. Wrap the conversation. So we'll just embrace that for another time and catch that on video. Jenna, I see you, and I know you had a question. I'm trying to be a good steward of time as well, and I apologize to you that I'm not going to get to your question. I do apologize for that. We have about 1 minute left before I promised I would wrap us. So I'm going to hand it back. And lightning round, just one last thought. Straight down the line, if you don't mind, please. Just to give you a chance to close on the thing that's most important to you.
I just want to, I'm very appreciative of BC holding this event for us. I think I've learned a lot from the discussion that we had earlier today. And again, I just want to emphasize solidarity with our population. Particularly like as men, I think oftentimes society tells us to be shut off from our emotions. And as you shared earlier, like it's okay to tap into that anger that we have, and that's part of our humanity. And I think it helps guide our work as being vulnerable and being aware of what we feel, not just in this setting, but in the workplace and in the community. And I'm just very appreciative of like our network and of the brotherhood that we have with our background in social work.
My parting shot, just thanking you, thanking the BC community for letting me be in, letting social work, I should say, be in this space. Real quick, Jesse, Marvin, y'all got anything to say? I gotta look out for my brothers. All right. I think, I hope this conversation and things and these, what we're talking about doesn't just get lost, and also just to realize the emotional labor that it takes to talk and to teach all the time, especially from maybe a Black woman's standpoint or a Latinx woman's standpoint. Just think about that labor, and I think you should take into account, again, with the money and salaries and what have you, just think about all the times we ask questions and this, that, and the third. That takes a lot from us, right? From our emotions. So just take that into account. And, I just hope these conversations don't fall on deaf ears. I hope it's used to open doors, and I hope that, there's ample amount of resources and mental health services to those of Black descent in this country. Thank you.
So my sister Shari, who's in the audience, asked us what Black women can do to support Black men, and I think that needs to be the other way around. It's very clear to me that Black men, we've not done our part with supporting Black women, and I was further ignited with this idea by Brittany Cooper's book, Eloquent Rage, which has been transformative in my life. And so I just wanted to answer that question. And I think tonight was really reaffirming to me the importance of community. As an academic, oftentimes we are in our silos doing research, and especially the sacrifices you make in elite spaces to get tenure as a Black person can be very hard on your life. And so this moment is reaffirming the need to stay in community when pursuing our goals.
I'm also very thankful and grateful for this, to just be here and learn this wealth of knowledge and wisdom from my brothers. Tiziana, thank you for inviting me again. I would just want to encourage my sister and brother social workers who are here today to continue to own the claim of being prophetic. The prophetic work is not controlled or owned by just the ecclesiastical circles or religion. As I said before, we've lost it in many ways. But social work it continues to be prophetic and ought to continue to just being out there, being on the edge, being a front runner, the vanguard, because the truth is, particularly as brothers of color, in this world of Barack Obama and now Cory Booker, truth of the matter is the Barack Obamas and Cory Bookers, however important and monumental they are and what they provide in terms of inspiring us and inspiring this world, their presence also, not on their part, but also brings out more racism, the reaction, the hatred. And so even in this world, even now, racism is not only alive and well, but it's increasing and it's getting uglier. And so we need the prophetic voices and the prophetic action and the deeds of social work.
It costs a person something to share the way the four of you have shared. Thank you for doing it. Thank you very much, and please join me. Thank you.
Of the school to thank these four wonderful panelists. We have James Baldwin's collected works from Library of America, one of those prophetic voices. We want to, as a gratitude for your time.
Thank you so much. We're going to transition now to recognizing this year's distinguished alumni winners.
Wow. Well, I just turned to two of my colleagues and asked how I'm supposed to follow that. So I think I'll keep this brief. My name is Paul Heidhaus. I'm a proud social worker, a proud 2006 graduate of the Boston College School of Social Work, and a member of the Boston College School of Social Work Alumni Board. The mission of the Alumni Board is to represent alumni and facilitate their continued commitment and involvement in the activities and direction of the school, the social work profession, and the social work field. The board's role is to facilitate the engagement of alumni with the school and act as a liaison between the alumni and the school. Social workers have played an important role in both my personal and professional development, and every day I see the impact that social workers have on others. I joined the Alumni Board because I wanted an opportunity to give back to the people and the institution that have made me the person and the practitioner that I am today, as well as to provide support to those brave souls preparing to join our field. Throughout the year, we bring together alumni with current students and future social workers for a variety of activities, which include networking events, social opportunities, and community service projects, which I believe you can find out more about back at the registration table. One of our highlight events is this evening's panel and the Distinguished Alumni Awards, where we honor the achievements and contributions of fellow alums. Boston College School of Social Work alums work in all areas of the health and human services field. We work globally and nationally and locally. We are in government agencies, state houses, prisons, hospitals, communities, schools, and homes. The populations that we serve and advocate for include children and adolescents, adults and older adults, those with mental illness, those with physical illness, and those with substance abuse disorders, those who are gay, straight, bisexual, and transgender. We work with immigrants and refugees. We work to address issues such as poverty, abuse, social justice, healthcare, and civil rights. Each year, the board honors two MSW or PhD alums who have made significant contributions to the field of social work. One, a recent alum who has graduated within the last 5 to 10 years, and one more experienced alum who has graduated over 10 years ago. Past winners have included Angela McLean, a 2001 PhD graduate. Dr. McLean served as the Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families under former Governor Deval Patrick, and in 2013 was named the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Social Workers. Andrea Cohen, a 1984 MSW graduate, is a successful entrepreneur and a tireless advocate for seniors and home care services. She is also the co-founder and CEO of HomeWorks, a leader in providing home care services in Massachusetts. This year, the Alumni Board had the honor of again selecting from among a strong pool of nominees. While the board makes the final decision, nominations are submitted by faculty, staff, and fellow alums. While nominees represent diverse backgrounds and varying geography, they share a commitment to the values that are instilled in all graduates of the Boston College School of Social Work and a desire to make the world a better place. To present this year's first award, I'd like to introduce Dr. Margaret Lombard.
Hello, I am indeed honored to say a few words about Dr. Tanya Sharp, one of our nominees for the Distinguished Alumni Award. I first met Tanya, and I'm going to date myself by saying this, when I joined the Boston College faculty in 2005. And I learned about her passion for social justice, as well as a commitment to exploring the question of homicide among African Americans from our mentor, Professor Leslie Wind. I also learned about Tanya's leadership to the doctoral program. Upon graduating from the Boston College School of Social Work, Dr. Sharp accepted a faculty position at the University of Maryland, where she continued exploration of the question of homicide and coping strategies that are utilized by Black family members of homicide victims. Our primary motivation for doing this work has been to identify and develop effective, culturally relevant responses to help family members that are affected by homicide to manage their grief and bereavement. At the risk of sounding like a stalker, I will acknowledge that I've followed Tanya's work closely. Our work has taken an interdisciplinary slant, incorporating social work approaches with public health approaches to addressing the question of community violence and victimization among African Americans. And you may be wondering, why did I nominate Tanya? I nominated Tanya for a number of reasons. One of the reasons that I nominated Tanya, if you know Tanya, you know and understand, it's her energy. Tanya brings energy, she brings passion, she brings commitment to the work that she does. She also brings discipline. Like if you ask me what questions that Tanya asked since she left Boston College, she stayed committed to the same question that she asked as a doctoral student here, and she's grown in that area. She also brings leadership to that area. Another reason why I nominated Tanya is her mentorship of MSW students, doctoral students, as well as junior faculty. She has also published extensively in this area, and we wonder where she gets the time to continue working with communities of color, given everything that Tanya has accomplished since she left Boston College, but she still continues to work with communities of color on the issue of homicide, victimization, and coping. Among her many accolades, Dr. Sharp, and I'm calling Tanya Dr. Sharp, I never do that, so this is problematic. But here now, Dr. Sharp is well known for developing a comprehensive model of coping for African American survivors of homicide victims, as well as an inventory for African American survivors of homicide victims. What is impressive about these two tools that she's developed is that they are theory-driven. I'd also like to add here proudly that she currently holds the Factor Inotash Endowed Chair of Social Work in Global Community at the University of Toronto. And believe me, I can go on and on talking about Tanya's many accomplishments, but I'll stop here. And I'd like to address Tanya. I know Tanya's not in this room, but spiritually, I'm saying to Tanya, you make us proud, Tanya. You make us look good. And congratulations for being a nominee for this year's Distinguished Alumni Award.
So Tanya, unfortunately, is a victim of the polar vortex. She was unable to fly in from Toronto, although she tried very hard. So we're going to have her good friend, Sean, come up and accept the award for her, and then she's videotaped an acceptance that we'll play after.
Due to some severe cold weather conditions, I unfortunately was unable to make it to Boston College to receive the Distinguished Alumni Award in person. But please, please, please know from the bottom of my heart how very, very, very grateful I am for the nomination. So thanks to Dr. Margaret Lumbay, thanks to Cindy Snell for organizing, and certainly thanks to my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Sean McGuffey, for accepting the award on my behalf. But lastly, I want to let you all know that this award means so, so very much to the survivors of homicide victims. When I think about accepting this award and its importance, I think about the Michael Browns, the Trayvon Martins, Tamir Rices, and so many Black homicide victims who often appear on Section D of our newspapers. By giving me this award, you bring voice. You give voice to so many who have been feeling as though they are voiceless. And for that, I truly, truly thank you. Have a good evening.
I'd now like to invite up Dr. Betty Blythe, who will introduce our next award winner.
Thank you. I am so pleased that the Alumni Association selected Lamar Polk for the recent Distinguished Alum Award. And it's my pleasure to tell you a little bit about why I nominated Lamar. I think you've heard that expression, if you looked in a dictionary and you'd see a picture, look up something in a dictionary, you'd see a picture of somebody. Well, if you update it a little bit, you Google social worker, you should find a picture of Lamar Polk. And in fact, when I'm meeting people and they don't know about social work and they ask me what a social worker does, I often try to think back to what Lamar does as a way to communicate that. In my opinion, Lamar represents the best of social work. I didn't nominate him for this award because of any single accomplishment, but it's the composite of all the things that he does and the way in which he demonstrates excellence in social work, in every facet of his social work practice. He spent his career on the front lines of social work, showing up every day. He provides services to the most marginalized members of the community. Most of his work since graduation has been at the Shattuck Hospital, whose patients typically arrive after being refused services by multiple facilities. because they are uninsured or underinsured. These include individuals with specialized care needs, clients who are suffering from significant behavioral and social issues, such as active substance abuse during previous medical admission, homeless individuals, substance-addicted patients, and undocumented residents. In addition to these challenges, many of Lamar's clients are people of color and/or people who are identified as LGBT. So basically, in short, he has chosen to work with our most underserved citizens who seem to have intractable problems. And I know that many of you in this room work with very similar groups of people. In addition to his commitment to providing exceptional services, one thing that strikes me about Lamar is he always goes the extra mile for his clients. He sometimes will mention, just in passing to me, that he creatively came up with an idea to meet the needs of a challenging client, or he'll mention his extraordinary activism around a specific mental health policy. He's cognizant of the very minor, seemingly small needs of the people he works with. For example, this one vignette he told me when we were out one night for dinner was, he was noticing that some of his clients had to leave the hospital with a plastic garbage bag to carry their belongings. And he recognized the indignity of that. And he somehow managed to get suitcases, so people would have suitcases to take their belongings out of the hospital. He only mentions these things in passing, however, he doesn't brag. Also, I would say, as someone who teaches policy, I'm always impressed and, let's be honest, really happy when I see a social worker who works in direct practice but also is well informed about and advocates for public policy reform to improve the system. Whether he's writing the Department of Mental Health about his concerns regarding state regulations or attending meetings at the State House, Lamar is fully engaged in advancing the quality of mental health treatment in the Commonwealth. In addition to his dedication to his clients and the profession, he has a long history of volunteering and fundraising for nonprofits and social work organizations, going way back to when I met him as a graduate student. He was a student in a class I taught at the time that involved a service learning trip to Hungary and Romania. And I believe it's very important for us when we learn so much from NGOs to give back in some way. And when we returned, Lamar was a really strong volunteer in giving back and continuing to work with other alum from that class. He even learned how to make jewelry as part of our fundraising efforts. He's volunteered as a counselor for a camp for transgender and gender nonconforming youth and their families, a camp that was actually started by one of our alum, and also was a previous recipient of this award. He participates in the AIDS Walk Boston and Shattuck Partners Walk, fundraises for a long list of organizations. In short, I can always count on Lamar to hit me up for a donation. As I said at the outset, Lamar represents excellence in every facet of our profession. And please join me in congratulating him for receiving this.
So I have to say, I wrote up a speech that I was planning to read, and there are elements of that which I may speak to. But the panelists, my brothers, have transformed this space for me. And they transformed it in a way that I feel I can be a bit more authentic, which is something that I yearn for and strive for when I can, safely. First to Betty, thank you so much for nominating me, and thank you for all of those kind words. You know I don't like to toot my own horn, so thanks. To the Alumni Board, thank you for selecting me, and thank you for believing that I embody the qualities that represent this particular award. And although she's not here, I did want to congratulate Dr. Sharp, because clearly she very much deserves the award that she received as well. When Betty said that she wanted to nominate me, the first thing that I thought was, why? And I thought that because I'm just a social worker. Everything that I do is reflective of our profession. It's reflective of the tenets that I believe. And to me, that's just what it is. So when I'm striving to promote equity, when I'm striving to promote social justice, when I'm striving to promote inclusion, when I'm striving to advocate, innovate, and empower the people that I work with, that's just a reflection of being a social worker. When I found out that I was selected to receive the award, I remember feeling honored, slightly bewildered, and a bit overwhelmed. And then when Cindy told me that I had to give a speech, felt a lot of things, and I'll just keep those to myself. But I guess what I want to do in the brief time that I'm up here is just speak to a few specific things that I think I've learned over my short but growing social work career, and BC has played a large part in that as well. So one is to live and practice authentically. So myself, I identify as gay. And before I came to BC, I had just come out to my family. They're extremely religious. That was something that was different for them, but we've grown around that. And it was important to me to come to Boston, because I'm from Texas, and to authentically live my experience and share myself in a way that honored who I was. And I wasn't quite sure how that was going to translate at BC, but I very surprisingly, in a good way, really was welcomed with open arms to this community and really allowed to share all that I am and showcase all that I can. And I'll forever be grateful for that. Another point, seizing opportunities that come your way. So my first internship actually is where I now work. And it's surprising that everything kind of came full circle, but a lot of what I was able to learn and a lot of what I was able to demonstrate in that moment carried itself over the years. And it supported me in getting a full-time position with the Department of Public Health. One of the things that I always tell students that I work with is that you should always do the best that you can, but you should also realize that the people that you work with, your clients, your patients, they're doing the best they can with what they have and what they know. And that should always be taken into consideration. And just lastly, kind of like Betty was alluding to, I am a clinical social worker, but I believe it's important to really practice social work in a systemic way and to really intervene at all levels when possible. Again, I just wanted to say a few brief things. Thank you, Betty, again, for nominating me. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a mentor. My family can't be here, but I do want to thank them, because without them, none of this would be possible. And I just really thank the School of Social Work for this honor. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a great night. Really, just so moved by all the sharing that went on. So now we have a chance to celebrate. The wings will open and food will appear. So please join us for the reception that's available now.